Welcome to another episode of HTM On The Line, the podcast that is for HTM by HTM. I'm your host, Bryant Hawkins Sr., and today we have a truly exceptional guest joining us. Mike Zimmer, a key leader at FSI Services, brings invaluable experience and innovation to the HTM industry. Today, we'll discuss his journey, his work at FSI Services, his vision for the future, and the lessons we can all take from his remarkable career. But first, we have a word from our sponsor, whose generous support helps make this podcast possible.
Today's podcast is brought to you by FSI. Optimize your hospital's facilities and healthcare technology management operations with FSI's CMMS platform. Their comprehensive, cloud-based maintenance management software is standardized, scalable, and designed to empower your team with accurate, practical, and impactful data. Now, let's jump into this week's podcast.
All right, welcome to another episode of HTM On The Line. I have a special guest today, Mr. Mike Zimmer, and I'm not talking about the coach, Mike. It's Mike Zimmer from FSI Services. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing quite well, Brian. How are you doing?
Oh, great, man. Glad to see we can get together and talk a little bit. First off, Mike, before we get started, tell everyone where you're from and who you're working with.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I currently live in a very quaint New England town of West Hartford, Connecticut. I work with an organization called FSI Services.
Before we get into FSI Services, I know you're from the Pennsylvania area, but not Pennsylvania, the Boston area, New England area.
Connecticut is where I call home today.
Okay. So sales, What inspired you to pursue a career in sales, and how did you get started in this industry?
Yeah. So, it should be known that I am the technical component of the sales team here at FSI. I'm what's known as the solutions engineer, and at FSI, I'm the solutions engineering manager. So what that ultimately means is that I am the person that you talk to, or that, our potential customers talk to when they're needing to understand the technical components of the different software solutions we provide to them. I did not start off my career being what is known as an SE. I actually started off as kind of a pure account executive, working at a software company based out of Austin. I'm not going to name names, but they were also a healthcare-based CMMS solutions providing company. I was looking for a change. I've always been rather technical. I've got a degree in molecular biology. I dig on technology, and it was always my favorite part of interacting with customers and providing an actual solution to the challenges that they had. So when the opportunity presented itself, I raised my hand and said, "Hey, I'd love to fill that kind of a role." I did that, and it's really worked out well for me. Over the past, it's probably close to a decade at this point.
Oh, wow, man. That's awesome. Now, this podcast is, as I always say, it's for HTM by HTM, and it's a motivating and mentoring type of podcast. So I want to ask you, have there been any mentors or pivotal moments in your career that has significantly impacted your growth as a sales professional?
Yeah. So a great question. And this is going to have a shout out to somebody that may be listening to the podcast, but, within the context of being this guy that is working within an industry where I didn't have a background in it. So like the needs of healthcare technology management professionals, I struggled with what is known as imposter syndrome. If you've been exposed to that term, I'm sure many of your listeners have been, where I thought that was just going to be like discovered as this phony, and I didn't know really what I was talking about. But I had a mentor at that point in my career, a gentleman named Al Gresh. Shout out to Al, or to anybody that knows Al. I'm sure he's given you similar guidance, where he coached me up. He was like, "Hey, listen, this is what you need to know about clinical engineering, biomedical engineering, HTM, et cetera. And this is what your cohort, Bryant, really care about out of the kinds of solutions that we were positioning to them. I've really taken that to heart. And at this point in my career, I have a pretty deep understanding of the different challenges that not just HTM professionals, but also kind of the facility engineering and plant operations professionals really struggle with day to day. And it's really helped me out in my career and ultimately providing very valuable solutions. And I mean that. I'm not just, using sales buzzwords to the healthcare industry. And so that is what comes to mind, who comes to mind whenever somebody asks me about a mentor.
Now, are you and this mentor still close, or you still communicate?
Yes, we actually texted back and forth earlier today.
Great. That's a great mentor to have. If y'all continue.
100%, dude.
I mean, you must be a great mentee, because I tell people in order to be a good mentor, you have to have a great mentee. It's a two-way street.
100%. I tell this to my kids all the time that, never be afraid to put on the white belt and just say, hey, I don't know how to do something. I don't know what you're talking about. Because that intellectual curiosity, when you really listen to the people that want to tell you about something, it just provides asymmetrical returns on your growth as a human being. And then, of course, in your professional life as well.
Now let's get into this FSI Services. What innovative solutions does FSI, sorry about that, bring to the biomed and facility industry that may set y'all apart from other companies that do what y'all do?
So this is not necessarily a hot take, but Bryant, I have worked with a bunch of these different solutions, and there are always going to be new capabilities or feature sets, stuff that is kind of a flash in the pan for the industry where it might get a lot of attention initially. The special thing about FSI is we focus on what we're trying to do with our solutions at a different level, if that makes sense. And I always think about things in terms of themes. So in this case, within FSI, we focus around really four, at least in my opinion, four key areas that really drive innovation in our corner of the healthcare industry. So our expertise, it's important to note that quite a few of the resources that we have at FSI have actually sat in clinical engineering chairs, walked in HTM shoes. Same thing on the facilities engineering side of things. And so everything's been designed, developed, and deployed with this kind of practitioner-based approach in terms of what the software is capable of doing. And that expertise really is peppered throughout the entirety of the organization, as well as the products, right? Automation is also key. At the end of the day, a lot of CMMS and enterprise asset management tools are simply relational databases with a UI laid over the top of it and maybe some, interesting relationships across those different data elements. We've taken it a step further and started to automate quite well different activities that take place within the CMMS, so we can really help drive additional time back to the individual users so that they can maximize the amount of wrench time that they have out there in the field, which is ultimately the job that all of our clinical engineers, facilities engineers, were hired to do. The other two items here, so the third is going to be analysis. So CMMS solution, and this is probably pretty similar for any kind of enterprise-based software solution, is it's a question of inputs and outputs. So the input side of things, we've made it super easy for everybody to interact with this tool. How do we then make use of the data via some of the analytic capabilities that we've got there, where we can really meet organizations that might not have a business intelligence team to derive insights out of their CMMS data. We instead have out-of-the-box offerings with some additional configurability. So if they're wanting to ask other different, more interesting questions of their data, they have the ability of doing so. And then finally, interoperability, which is a fun word to say. It's also a very powerful capability of our overall solution suite because we are very well aware that a CMMS is just one aspect of the, let's call it the tapestry of software solutions that clinical engineering, HTM folks, as well as anybody else within the healthcare industry are going to be interacting with. So how do we make it easy to incorporate other disparate solutions, separate solutions into the use of the CMMS? So we make it that central repository of all asset related information. And then how do we operationalize that information once it's on board within the tool? And so we do have like the feature lists that are the articulation of those four major themes. So our binders, our electronic binders product, which is an inspection ready documentation component of the tool that helps automate compliance reporting. CMS Flow, which is our automation capability. Capital planning. So how do we leverage that total cost of ownership data to help support repair versus replace decisions? Analytics, as I had already mentioned. And then we have a very robust and capable API. In addition to these capabilities, you've also got this expertise of the people that are built up around the product that are there to solely focused on the healthcare industry and the specific needs that you all have. I think I've been talking about for 4 minutes or so straight. Sorry about that, but it's a topic that I'm super passionate about.
Oh, no, man. I'm learning as you're talking. Now, let me ask you this question here.
Yeah.
Have you ever, FSI rather, have they ever implemented a CMMS across both HTM and facilities at the same time?
So at the same time, probably we absolutely have customers that span both functional groups.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's super key there is appreciating the different needs across those two different groups of folks. And thankfully we do have the thought leadership that goes into successfully standing up what an HTM group needs out of a CMMS versus what facilities needs.
So my question would be, if some challenges might arise, if you can maybe share what might arise, and if they did arise, how did you guys address those challenges?
I think we try to preempt a lot of those challenges, like get ahead of the curve a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And that is due in large part to the kind of architectural underpinnings of our solution. So it's highly segmented. Meaning that, you've got this database, it's got these different capabilities, but within that database, there's a segmentation between different groups that might be leveraging it. So facilities would be in one segment, clinical engineering would be in the other. Now, they both have their kind of independent slices of the tool where they can really configure the different screens or the different objects, the different tables, modules of the tool to fit their specific needs. But they're still tying into a common shared segment database. So in that shared segment, you might disseminate or distribute certain standard tables or data constructs within the CMMS. What's jumping to mind right now is things like the location hierarchy is going to be consistent across the two user groups in that case. Same thing as if, EVS or security or food and nutrition were to be leveraging the tool as well. So that does go a long way, that flexibility and autonomy, while still tying into a singular standardization or normalized nomenclature kind of construct within the under the hood portion of the CMMS tool.
Oh, man, great. Now, with the rise of all this AI and digital transformation going on, how has FSI adapted its offerings to have a more seamless facility management program, or HTM?
Yeah, so the concept or the introduction of AI is interesting because I think that a lot of the software vendors out there, particularly in the CMMS space, they use AI as a buzzword, meaning that, okay, AI is a big deal. Let's see what kind of blog posts we can create where we introduce at a very surface level what an AI tool, a chatbot, whatever the case might be, may improve the performance of a CMMS. But because of the expertise that we have within the four walls of FSI. We have taken a much more thoughtful approach, and we're still currently thinking through what are the specific use cases where we can leverage a large language learning model to assist our customers in answering the questions that they're asking of their CMMS data. And I'm not committing to anything on the roadmap here, but the way we're thinking about this is, we have this analytics tool that's part of our overall suite. What if we introduce an LLM into that where a user can be like, show me my PM percent completion for this modality or this category of device for the month of December. They just type that in kind of a plain text or everyday language kind of syntax, and then have that tool, that portion of our tool, provide them with a result that they're immediately after, versus clicking through a variety of different filters to get down to that level of detail. So that's AI. That's kind of how we're thinking about it or approaching it, and really interesting to figure out the thoughtful incorporation of that technology. But from an overall digital transformation kind of strategy perspective, in my opinion and in the opinion of others that are closer to the product roadmap, that's really where process automation and interoperability comes into play. Because I feel like the industry finds itself in a little bit of a quandary. There are massive technology companies out there. You and your audience are familiar with who these names might be. But the thing is like the capabilities of these massive platform as a service companies are awesome. The configurability or customization capability that their customers have, awesome. However, it goes back to that team and that expertise around the product offering, where if we're in a dialogue and it's an evaluation of our tools and you start quoting EC and EP or DNV regulations, we start talking about AEM, we can have an informed discussion about that, versus these other super awesome like technologies that you're interacting with. They're going to be like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. So it's all about walking that balance between what are these amazing technologies and how do we thoughtfully incorporate them into what a healthcare CMMS and EAM needs to be doing for its customers.
You mentioned about CMS flows and capital planning, analytics. In what ways does FSI support HTM teams, biomed teams, in managing complex equipment life cycles, say from procurement to end of life? How do y'all go about managing that for biomed teams?
Yeah. So when I'm posed with this kind of question, it does come up a lot. It is, how do we provide the instrumentation layer to an organization, to an HTM organization that is trying to work up like a maturity curve, meaning, can we or rather, instead of we can, technologically support an organization's data integrity policy, meaning that when you onboard a new device or new fleet of equipment, we are going to be able to check the box or enforce, the various permissions and role settings to make sure that the data, when it first enters into the system, is top notch and has a high degree of integrity, which is kind of an odd place to start, but that's the very beginning. That's the cradle part of the life cycle process with a medical device. And then, of course, how do we automate things like the procedures that need to be done, the checklist of items that need to be done from an incoming inspection perspective? How do we gather, or we can gather, the total cost of ownership from both an in-house as well as third-party perspective against the fleet of medical equipment? To inform the ongoing analysis that goes into, hey, do we need a budget for the replacement of this particular model or whatever the case might be? We provide the ability of capturing condition assessment data on the medical device. Hey, it looks like we're coming up against technological obsolescence for this model. We're approaching the end of life. We've captured the end of service letter on the device or at the model level of the inventory. And then ultimately, when the decision is made to retire that piece of equipment, to dispose of it, the CMS flows, I think, come back into play so that we can then start automating the different processes that go into ensuring that you dispose of those assets in the appropriate way. That might be, wiping the storage component of a networked medical piece of equipment prior to giving it to a reseller, or, sending it off to be recycled. That's how I'm thinking about it anyway.
Now, my questions are going to be all over the place, man. So just bear with me.
Cool.
It popped in my head while you were talking. Go back to your CMMS system, and how can FSI system improve communication and workflow between HTM technicians and other hospital departments?
Now that can take place in a variety of different ways. Let's see. So actually, let's do this, Brian. Which two departments are like, what collection of departments or areas of a healthcare organization are you thinking about?
All right. Yeah. Let's just take, for example, X-ray. They call up biomed team. Is there a way you can tell me what pieces of equipment are close to end of life in my department?
Yeah. So how do you answer that question with the data in the CMMS?
Yes.
Yeah. So, in that particular scenario, I would pull up the assets, the X-ray assets, and, based on the in-service date of that particular device, and the estimated, the life expectancy for that particular piece of equipment, the tool is going to automatically calculate what that retirement date is going to be, just from a pure installation versus life expectancy perspective. Now, you're going to want to include some other factors in that, but when you get that onesie twosie question from that other group, that's going to be able to provide you with visibility into, yep, you're right. This has got 6 months left prior to it reaching its scheduled retirement date. Just as one example.
Yes. Level of support and training does FSI provide to ensure that HTM technician can utilize your system
so that they know what the heck they're doing in the tool? So, of course, we have in-house training resources so that when we acquire a new customer, they will go on site or remote, right? And that's a pretty standard offering of any CMMS company. Of course, there are qualitative differences in terms of the resources that we can deploy out into the field to train our customers up versus others that I've experienced with in the past. But after implementation, after go live, is really when you're going to need to have resources available for, in the event that there's turnover or somebody needs a refresher. Thankfully, we have a variety of different channels to get continually trained up on the current capability of the tool and then future updated, upgraded capabilities of the solution. So, of course, there are monthly webinars, and these aren't sales-driven webinars. These are actually customer success-driven, where it's typically one of our customer success managers and a support service person taking our customers through typical workflows or something new and exciting that's come out. So that's nice. In the product itself, we have something called resource centers, and there you're going to have access to our user community, which is called the Neighborhood. That was my shameless plug for the Neighborhood. And that's where it's all the customers that want to engage in an open forum discussion over, what are they loving about the tool? And then probably more interestingly for our product team, what isn't going so great? And they kind of work together to understand how different, different healthcare organizations are working through it. Within that resource center, there are also training modules too. So that is a training module where you actually click through screens. It shows you how to do things. And at the end of it, you take a quiz and there's a certification. You can get that certification and use it as part of your, you can have it associated to your user record within the tool. And then finally, leveraging a solution called Pendo, we have in-product walkthroughs. So if I'm brand new to the CMMS, I can select that and it's going to tell me how to do with on-screen guidance, how to do something like creating a new asset or, closing out a work order. And so there's a variety of different support services and training resources available following go live. And then, of course, our support services team is standing by waiting to help our customers when they have questions.
I noticed that I don't know, it wasn't just recently, but I noticed I went on your page and did a little stalking, not your page, but FSI's
cool.
page.
Yeah, bring it on.
And I noticed FSI recently held I don't know if it was a training session or a customer appreciation, where you had a bunch of your customers there, I guess at your facility or somewhere.
Yep. Can
you share more about the purpose and focus of that event?
Yeah. So there's you may have come across one of two things, or maybe both things. The first thing is our annual user conference. And so we pick a place to drive attendance towards, and that is, I'm trying to remember what the attendee numbers were from the most recent one in Charleston. It's probably over 150 of our customers. They send representation to the user conference, where we do things like we'll have thought leaders within the industry come and present about things like compliance. We'll have our product leadership take them through soon to be offered capabilities within the tool. It's very, very similar to the vibe of an Apple kind of worldwide developer conference without the black turtlenecks and sneakers. And then it's also just a really good time for our customers to meet each other, to talk about the struggles that they're having, within their day-to-day jobs, how they use our tools in order to make that a little bit easier. So that's the user conference, and that's a lot of fun. The other kind of frequent gathering of some of our kind of top end customers in terms of their utilization of the tools are our customer advisory board meetings. And that is like, I don't want to say they go to a mountain lair or anything like that, but it's a select group of customers from both clinical engineering as well as facilities. And they gather around a conference table and they really get into it. And they help define what our roadmap is going to be over the medium and long term, out to things like 2 or 3 year projections on what we're going to, or where we're going to take our products next.
Yep. I was thinking about the one in Charleston. So yeah, that was the one that was real cool. Yeah.
I should have paused and asked you, is that the one you were taking a look at?
Yeah,
I just got excited.
Yeah. Now, how does FSI approach data security? That's a big thing now in hospitals with the cybersecurity issues. So how does FSI approach data security, and how do you guys go about that?
Yeah, for sure. So that let's say problem or challenge is twofold, because as an organization, we need to be as secure as possible with the way that we handle our customers' data. And to that end, we are SOC 2 Type 2 compliant, which is a certification around the organization as well as the software to make sure that the different controls are in place to protect our customer data within the cloud that we host their information in. And then when we're looking to provide solutions from a security perspective or cybersecurity perspective on the part of our customers, that is where we get back into being that centralized repository for all the information having to do with your clinical devices. So up to and including the medical device metadata, network metadata for things like your networked clinical devices. So what I'm talking about here is building those integrations to those medical device IoT solutions like Medigate, Assimile, Zingbox, and others, so we can consume those events, that anomalous behavior when it's detected by those agentless discovery tools, and ultimately operationalize those alerts into something like a work order that gets automatically assigned out to a technician so that they know they need to do something to that device because there's something wonky going on with it. Maybe somebody plugged their phone into an open USB port on the side of an infusion pump or whatever the case might be. Not that ever happens.
It doesn't. Yeah. Can you possibly describe a recent project where FSI's technology or services directly improved operation for a facility?
There are a lot to choose from. Okay, so I have two different stories to tell. They're pretty quick. I say that, but I'll probably prattle on for another 10 minutes. But one has to do with analytics. So, I had started this conversation off with talking about how do we make use of the data being tracked in the tool. I'm not going to name drop any specific customers. However, we had an organization that knew, and this is on the facility side, but I think the underlying capability kind of holds true for HTM groups as well. They knew they had a backlog of requests. There is never enough time in the day, nor are there enough resources on staff to handle every single piece of work that gets thrown at them. They knew they had a backlog. They knew they had a ton of deferred maintenance, but they had no idea exactly how much or what location that made up this IDN was really driving that. Nor did they have any way of measuring, if we were to develop a strategy to mitigate the growth of that backlog or to reduce it, are we even having an effect? Are we throwing sand into a wave? With CMS Analytics, we were able to visualize that information so that they, knew what the measurables were, and then they could start working towards managing it. And I am happy to report that, through just the pure analytical capabilities of our tools, they were able to, measure the efficacy of the strategy they deployed in taking on that backlog. They've capped the growth of it, and now they have started to decrease it, given the same amount of resourcing that they had available to them. There are a bunch of different interesting stories to talk about using the data in a CMMS to also justify increasing FTE or headcount. But maybe we can talk about that some other time when we're at a conference or something. Additionally, there was a very large health system that had let's call it a poor experience in the implementation of the product that they were using. And so they went to market to look for a new tool. We had originally, proposed to them to move to our solutions prior to them choosing this other solutions provider. But given the really poor experience that they were having, they were struggling. They were, it was becoming an emergent issue. They couldn't get the PMs generated, et cetera. But this is where our expertise came into play, because we were able to effectively jump into the middle of that implementation, shape the data, make sure that prior to importing it into our tools, everything was good to go and buttoned up, so that ultimately we were able to finish the implementation, but into our solutions, and so that they were able to recognize, a reasonable time to value on the CMMS. It just happened to be a different CMMS at that point.
Wow, man, that's two very interesting stories, and like you made some folks happy. Now, Mike,
yeah, we try to make more than some folks happy, but we are human.
Now, Mike, as we wrap up,
yeah,
what's one key takeaway or piece of advice you'd like to share with our listeners about how FSI Services can make a difference in their operations?
Key takeaway or a piece of advice, and I'm going to put this into kind of a competitive context just because that's where I spend most of my days. If anybody listening to this is thinking about evaluating alternatives to what they're currently using, or they're currently doing that right now, one, pick up the phone and give me a call. I would love to have a conversation. But secondly, I would really encourage everyone to find not so much a solutions vendor, but really do your due diligence and find an organization that you could consider a partner. And I know that might seem kind of cliche, but at the end of the day, you're going to want somebody that listens twice as much as they talk, so that when you articulate what are the challenges, the processes you want to be supported by a piece of software, a CMMS, you want somebody that really understands it, asks great questions, and frankly is candid or honest when, maybe that's not a capability of their tool, or they have a suggestion for another way of doing it.
Now, looking ahead, What excites you most about the future of FSI Services?
So, as I mentioned before, I've worked with a handful of companies that have done something similar-ish to what FSI is doing. And I think what gets me the most excited about it is, or are, the experts that we employ, our ability to actually listen to the feedback of our customers and do something with that in a very quick fashion. We'll get feedback, we'll design something great, and then we'll just put it into the product. That is super exciting day to day. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning and to my computer here in Connecticut. I think long term or overarching, the fact that we have taken or are going to continue to take our tools and make them the operational hub for all things HTM asset and facilities, management related, with that focus on interoperability and really just driving towards just really strong outcomes for our customers. I think that's really what I think makes the future hold quite a bit of promise here at FSI.
Well, Mike, I appreciate you coming on HTM on the Line, man.
My pleasure, Bryant. It's been a pleasure.
It's great talking with you. You definitely have a passion for what you do and for this industry as a whole. And I appreciate your time. And man, if you ever get back into coaching, man, I want some tickets.
All right. Sounds good.
All right, brother. Take care.
Thank you very much.
That concludes our conversation with Mike Zimmer. Mike, thank you for sharing your expertise, your journey, and your inspiring vision with us. Your work at FSI Services highlights the profound impact HTM professionals have on healthcare. And your insights today are a powerful reminder of the critical role we all play in shaping this industry. To all our listeners, thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your colleagues. Together, we're building a stronger, more innovative HTM community. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries, stay passionate, and always strive to make an impact. See you in the next episode of HTM On The Line. Y'all be safe out there.